Hey, we're live. And I hit this button. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about Zoeti. But before we do that, run to the folks at home. What is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we talk about the Fast and Furious films, but we're taking a little break to talk about games. No, on this podcast, we talk about games, and this is a pretty unique one, right? So obviously I'll just start with the disclosure. I worked on Zoeti. We signed Zoeti probably like a year and a half ago almost. And it is now out. I'm super obsessed with the game. Honestly, even after it being out, I'm still pretty obsessed with the game. Rachel was making fun of me over the weekend because I was just playing on the Switch just because like I was just hanging out with people and we were hanging out on the couch in front of my TV and I was just like, why don't I just start playing Zoeti on the Switch? And that's exactly what I did. I don't know. I'm obsessed. I have to talk about this game. Go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been playing since launch as well. Similarly, I had a trip. I believe I talked about Mayhem Con. Shortly after it came out, I was like, you know what? I got a Steam Deck, so I loaded it up on my Steam Deck. And when I had time between games, I was playing on my Steam Deck. Arahe wants to clarify in the chat that she was making fun of you for bringing the Switch to the Red Fair.
Listen, there were a lot of tweets this fucking weekend. I also brought the Switch to the Ren Fair, and I also played some Zoeti at the fucking Ren Fair. Okay, you guys, I admit it. Okay.
It's thematically appropriate, right? It's like vaguely medieval themed.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's a game. I guess I mean I have not beaten all four scenarios yet, because the game is. We'll get into this. I think the game has roguelite difficulty, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
sometimes you're on and sometimes you're off. And it takes a little bit, and there's some things you can do to curve that, but it is a truly like like the truest roguelites random, right? Basic overview, it's kind of like Slay the Spire, except the cards are the cards you get in your hand are like normal playing cards, and use them to build hands. And you play those hands to do stuff.
Yeah, like so, and it follows poker rules, right? So two pair, full house, flush. There's a little bit of I don't know. There's a little bit of like variation in there technically, but
Yeah, like
generally speaking, like the more powerful abilities are going to be the ones that are rarer, right? Like everyone's capstone is a straight flush, right? Your straight flush is super powerful, and it's generally speaking something you're going to want to cast if you draw into it.
yeah. And just to be like the first character, Valerina, right, or something like that.
Valentina, yeah.
Valentina. She has a hand that's a mini flush, which is a 3-card flush, and I believe the combo character has a 3-card straight, which is a mini straight.
Yes, yeah. Alvis has the mini straight, and then also the decks are not true 52 card playing decks, right? So Valentina's deck is, I think it's 1 through 7 or something. It's like 1 through 7 of all 4 suits equally. But Alvis, honestly, I could just literally look this up. But Alvis, it's a little bit different because his deck is loaded towards spades and clubs. He has more spades and clubs than he does hearts and diamonds. And he has some. Oh God, how do I look at this? How can I see this on now that I have it open? I did not think this through, I guess. He has doubles of 1s and 2s and 3s. So it's pretty easy for him to make one pair, for instance. It's much harder for him to make a straight, for instance, right? Not that he makes real straights, he makes or a flush would be a better example of this. So yeah, the different characters all have different kind of contours to the way that they play. Nikora the mage has only 3 suits, I think. I don't think she has all 4 suits. Or she has a reduced amount of 2 suits. She makes flushes really easily, but it's very hard for her to make a straight because she has 1 through 10. Of some of those suits. So when you're trying to draw into when you're trying to draw into a straight, you can run into these issues that are bad, tough to deal with. Yeah.
Arahi asks in the chat if you can customize the deck eventually. I feel like I saw something like that I've never touched.
I think that's just a localization error. I think I know
Okay.
what you're talking about. You're talking about it says create a deck. I think that just means this is what your deck is. In like the start menu.
Okay.
Maybe one day you can customize your deck. I don't know.
That feels like it might be broken. But yeah. If I have that's a great time to bring up my biggest criticism of the game, which is the localization. It is very what's the proper term for this now?
Not even Euro. It's like Asia jank.
Well, I
guess,
mean,
technically.
the classic term would be English, but I don't know if we're allowed to say that anymore.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Also, real quick, buddy, it sounds like you might be speaking through the wrong mic.
Oh, you're right. I am.
But yes, and it's not like it is not like Chinese knockoff T-shirt bad, which is like the kind of classic, but it is like hard to follow some things. Descriptions are not great. Some things that are flat out wrong. Like after the last cast, I asked buddies like, how do I sell items? Because one of the accessories I got said you could sell items for 250% cost. I'm like, I didn't know I could sell items. Turns out you can't. That's just like a downside.
It makes things cost 250% extra at the store. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. The tooltip for evade is like, it like shuts down my brain trying to read it, right? Because like when you understand evade, like when you play with it a little bit, you understand it intuitively. Basically, the way evade works is it will block up to 10 points of damage per stack, right? But if it cannot block all the damage, then it doesn't block anything, right? So if you have 3 stacks of evade and you take 35 damage, you're taking full 35 damage. If you had 30 stacks of armor, you would take 5 damage, right? Your 30 armor would absorb a piece of that hit. But if you have 3 stacks of evade and somebody attacks you for 1 damage each, you would lose all 3 stacks because each stack would absorb 1 damage, right? And I think evade is cool. I think evade is really interesting because it makes for some really complicated sort of puzzles to sort of solve, right? Like, oh, how can I buff myself so that I can go over top their evade, right? Or the other way, how can I send some small damage to get rid of their stacks of evade before I punch through with a much bigger, more powerful hit? That kind of a thing, right? But the tooltip is like impossible to understand because actually writing that out is just really complicated and hard. And then you write that out and then you translate it into English. Like it took me like a minute just to explain the concept in colloquial talking, right? I don't know how I would write a tooltip to do that any better.
Yeah. On top of that, like there's other things like that too. Like I still don't quite understand how freeze works. The way it works for me in practice is like if I have stacks of freeze, I stop attacking until it falls off.
Freeze is actually more straightforward. Freeze reduces your attack by 1 and by 5%.
Oh, okay. Is that all? That because the blob of text attached to it is not super clear. It's like in like decreasing by 1% or so. So like it has some confusing language in there. Is what I'll say. And but like essentially, whenever I get it, it's like, oh, this is enough. Like there's some like really interesting interplaying elements here, right? Like one of the standard kind of. There are 2 standard debuffs. It's like one cuts your attack by 25%, one cuts it by 50%. But then there's also strength down, which kind of like is like a flat, like instead of the percentage down, it's a flat down. And usually that's like if you're doing big hits, that's no big deal. Whereas if you're doing a lot of little hits, it's a big deal. So that's an interesting thing to play around with. Also, like like the buff creativity, I will say is very high, which is a shame for a game that has translation problems because explaining the concepts behind the buffs and debuffs is tough. Overall, I enjoy the game. I've been playing through a lot of it, but there was there's a thing that I can't decide how minor it is, which is there are places you can get to in the game where you have lost the fight at fight start, and you have to kind of have and it might just be energy shield, which is what I'm really talking about here, right?
Oh, I know exactly what you're gonna say. I love this, but yeah, go for it.
So like I have had a run stopped because I was doing all big damage attacks, and like even in places where that's not optimal, you can usually force through that. And in other roguelike games, right? Like you can have fights that you have a non-optimal strategy to do, but you can still fight through. If you have an energy shield opponent and you're I was running essentially an armor stacking build that used the shield bash skill to do big deeps, but because I had on my one card skill the shield, I hit like a standard energy shield enemy. I just couldn't break through 2 shields and kill him, right? Like he had like some sort of stacking he had a debuff on me that was just slowly whittling me down, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I don't think that's necessarily like a terrible thing. It just feels bad because that's like ever since I had that, I always have like my straight on Valentina, right? Yeah, my straight on her is the multi-attack one, because it's like I need that in case I run into one of these enemies. And
no, that's absolutely. I hit that exact same issue. I love the armor build. The armor build on Valentina is probably my favorite way to play this game. Maybe, I don't know. There's some other builds that are also very fun. But yeah, that's a real thing that you can run into where like if an enemy gets armor, if you have a powerful enough build, you can just outstrip that. Right? If an enemy has evade, you get a powerful enough build, doesn't matter, right? I can go through 8 stacks of evade by doing 90 damage, right? But energy shield takes the whole hit, no matter what, every time, right? You can hit them for 500 damage. Energy shield would plink that shit off without any problem, which is why it is like so so powerful. But there are some brutal fights where there are 4 stacks of energy shield every turn, and it's just like, how do I deal with this? And the answer is you build smarter. You build for that eventuality rather than the kind of the other version of things.
I understand that. It's just weird because it feels like that's like the only one where that happens, right? It's not like the game is encouraging me to build like encouraging me to hold certain things in all cases, right? Like it's just you need a multi-hit attack to deal with energy shield. It feels like, and maybe because I've only done the first 2 scenarios, there's another one that I need. Like I feel like if I went all multi-hit, like if I went like a multi-hit build, if I don't know how easy that, I feel like that's the thing that Alvis might do, right? It feels like you don't have these problems because evade, which would be the counterpoint, is still weak to multi-hits, right? Like the way you make something that's weak to multi-hits is something like strength down, right? But like strength down doesn't seem to be nearly as common or as sticky a thing, right? Like there are enemies that will I get this defense every turn, right? And you have to deal with it every turn. It's just, I don't know. It's I guess
there are definitely enemies I think that punish multi-hit. So for instance, there's a bunch of buffs. There's like revenge, where enemies get stacks of strength each time they take damage, right? Those guys really punish the multi-hit builds. The guys, there are dudes who do put
there's thorns, there's people that do things like per hit,
thorns,
right?
And then anytime you're up against frost enemies, those guys are really tough to deal with in multi-hit builds. It's also a question of I don't know, it's kind of interesting because the armor build is a very in my mind, the armor build is a very unique build. Most builds are a couple of different offensive abilities, right?
Sure.
Including a 1 skill offensive ability, and then you have a little supplemental. Here's where I get defense, right? Here's where I get my enhancement, right? And you typically kind of have some mix of all 3. But the armor build is the one that makes you go, oh, you want most of your stuff to be armor, right?
Yeah.
You want your single thing to be shield up. You want your 2 pair to be tactical guard. You want your full house to be Ashen Dominance, go on the offensive, or Armor Mastery, Impenetrable Defense, I think is what that one is called. And you only have one or two offensive abilities. But I do think that that interaction is like intended and like interesting, right? Something that is interesting about Alviz. Have you played a lot of Alviz?
No.
Okay. So Alviz's defensive abilities are debuffs mostly that he is putting on an enemy, right? He can give himself stacks of evade, which is a defensive ability, obviously. But he can also reduce the enemy's strength and cripple them, which cuts their attack value in half, right? So a lot of the ways that Alviz protects himself is by inflicting those debuffs onto targets. And if you don't have the proper balance of those, you will get blown out of the water in the exact same way you get blown out of the water by energy shield. So for instance, if I have only cripple as a debuff, which is the one that cuts it in half, multi-hits really shred you, because if I'm up against a guy who's dealing 3 damage 5 times, and I hit him with a cripple and he's dealing 2 damage 5 times, it's still a bunch, right? He's still hitting you a bunch. But if I'm up against somebody who's dealing 60 damage, cutting 30 damage off of that, right, by being able to cripple him to half strength is really useful, right? And then in the opposite scenario, if you can inflict a bunch of temporary, like weak strength weakens, right, which is what drops their strength by 1 and reduces those individual hits. With 2 hits I can make myself take 0 damage on a turn, kind of thing, right? But then I come up against a guy who's dealing 22 damage and it's just like, I can't deal with that. I have no good way to sort of deal with that. And I think that's just sort of the nature of the roguelike, right? Is that you want to have a I don't know, like a diverse enough build that you can handle a variety of situations, but a powerful enough. In like Magic, I would call this an engine, right? You call this like the thing that your deck is supposed to do. You assemble the pieces of your
Sure.
engine, right? Like the armor engine that is in Valentina. You need that to be powerful enough that you can defeat strong enemies later in the game, but you also need to shore up your weaknesses, right, in places where you have free kind of slots in order to defeat those enemies that are attacking you where you're weak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Yeah, no, I mean, and like I said, I think the game is overall good. It's just like it just feels bad when you hit a situation where you can't deal with it, right? Like to compare, I'd say like when I'm playing something like Slay the Spire, right? Like it is hard to get to a point where like there are fights that are tough and might kill you, but it feels like with a little bit of luck and a little bit of like careful play, you might be able to survive the fight. Whereas like there are like dead stops in Zoeti, right? Like there was a run that I like straight up gave up on in Zoeti because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get through this, right? And you learn that lesson, right? But like that feels like, I don't know. I was thinking about this. It's like it's also one of those things where it's like it feels like having one of, I guess because Zoeti just doesn't force you to discard any of your skills. It's not like it would be too powerful to let you like see what the enemies were and like customize your skills beforehand. But in general, it's it's
yeah.
super
It's
fun.
I also think that it is a game about, in a certain sense, it's almost like an RPG in this weird way where you are you are putting your build together in the same way like in WoW. I'll use talent points, and there's a certain amount of investment power that comes in that. One of the things that's tough about Zoeti is trying to pivot. If you've ever had to do that, right? Where you're midway through, you're not quite getting the stuff you're looking for, and you go, okay, fuck it. I'm going to start making radically different choices to kind of pick towards a new build, right? Zoeti's pretty punishing about that, I would consider. And part of me thinks that is, to be fair, that's true of a lot of roguelikes.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's like weirdly in the middle because it's like not as punishing as some games I've played, but like those games, it's like, well, the run's fucked, right? Like I'm restarting, right? Like whereas like
I actually, to be fair, the thing I want to compare it to is Estrella, and in Estrella, it is literally impossible to ever get that off because the whole point of that game is you are building a synergy. I mean, this is true for any deck builder, right? You are building a synergistic deck from minute one. So if I'm playing Astrea, Slay the Spire, Hearthstone, right, and I am picking synergistic pieces of my deck, and I'm trying to go from, let's say, a dragon deck in Hearthstone to a Murloc deck, it's like, good fucking luck, buddy. You've already picked half your cards, and they're dragons. You can't go back and change that. I'm sorry, right? The thing with Zoeti is the opportunity cost, because you're making choices and investing in certain kind of directions, right? If I'm spending my soul shards leveling up my soulstone fragments, leveling up my armor abilities, but then I decide I'm going away from an armor build and into a charge build or something like that, that really fucks you, right? Because you're basically throwing away 30 plus however many soulstone charges you've been building up to this whole time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I get that. Yeah. Although the game is pretty generous with like giving you upper level skills as you get towards the end. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what other things do you want to talk about with this game?
Man, this is interesting. I wanted to talk about a lot about the third scene, but I guess you haven't seen it. So you did beat the second scene just now, right?
Yes, right. Literally, as you sat down, I was like, I need a minute, and I beat the second scene like 15 minutes after that. So yes.
Yeah. So I think the thing that I found so addictive about Zoeti is the power feels so good in like a power fantasy way, and I don't know how to like really articulate this besides getting a fully stacked armor build together and then just going into some of these fights and stacking 250 armor in a turn, right, and just like blowing someone out of the water. That feels so fucking good, right? Or I mean, I've talked a lot about the armor build. There's some other versions of this. So Alvis has a build that's the drawing cards build, which is truly heinously stupid. Because he has this one ability that discards his whole hand and deals damage equal to the number of cards that he discards. But it gives himself a buff. And that buff is every time he draws a card for the rest of the game, the match, this battle, right? He deals 5 damage to a random enemy, and every time he shuffles his deck, he deals 10 damage to all enemies, right? And so the thing that you do there, which is insane, is you throw your whole hand away. The next turn you draw a full fist of cards, right? And then there's a 1 card ability that he has called Swift Step that allows you to discard cards in your hand and draw new cards in their place, right? So you can discard up to 5 cards and then draw new cards. And then so what you do is you discard your whole hand and then you use this 1 card ability over and over again, because each time you do, you're drawing 5 cards out of your deck. And so you're drawing a million cards, you're shuffling a million times, and you're just like mowing these people down with procs, right? But the interesting thing about the procs is, and the thing that makes this so like crazy and fun, in my opinion, is you're getting around a lot of the sort of defenses or problematic buffs that enemies can have, right? So for instance, Thorns, which is a buff that an enemy can have that says every time you deal damage to that enemy, you take a certain amount of damage back, right? The Thorns don't trigger because the damage comes off a proc. You're not dealing the damage directly. You're not directly attacking. You're just procking a bunch of damage onto them, right? And there's other stuff that's like really brutal, right? Like have you seen Gash, like the bleed ability?
Yes, yeah. It doubles every time you hit someone, right?
Yes, it doubles every time you attack. So if all you're doing is drawing cards, you're never attacking and you're never increasing your cash. And that stuff, I just like, I don't know, it's just like super fun. And there's something to that power fantasy that I don't know how to like properly explain. But it
feels like you're breaking the game. And it feels like you're doing it on your own genius, I think. And I think that's kind of like the kind of like there are games, right? Like traditionally, like I guess the JRPG space, right? Like what's the name of this? There's like this famous JRPG where everything has like 10 billion levels. Let me see if I could think of it. It's this is the D maybe. Uh, it's got the maybe the Pingus.
Dragon Quest?
No.
No way, right?
Hold on. Prinnies. It's from Disgaea. That's what I'm thinking of.
Oh yeah, Disgaea. Yeah, sure,
Disgaea is a game that, like, you know, the end game of that is you break the game, right? But like the game is throwing challenges at you. I have heard this is also true of Strangers of Paradise, which I have not played yet. But essentially, and Diablo kind of operates in this way too, right? Like, you were building the most absurd build you can, and like the game is throwing challenges up against you that can take it, and so you have to break the game in order to win. And I think that's there's like a very like kind of number go up joy in that, but it's number go up joy that like isn't as brainless as like, you know, a cookie clicker or whatever, right? Like it does require some smartness on your end. And I think Zoeti kind of harnesses that, right? Like it feels like ridiculous to be like ho, right? Like this last game I was playing, I was doing the armor build, and I had an artifact that like, or an accessory is what they're called in this. You know, every time you spend, or the first time each turn you spend a 1-cost card, you draw 2, right? It's just like, okay, that's
Pot of Greed. All right, that's not what it's called, but it is a reference to the Yu-Gi-Oh card Pot of Greed.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's a great, it's you know, it's a great kind of engine, along with things. It's like things that are like less directly impactful, but it's like, oh, you know, this one implies debuffs every time you cast a bunch of, like, you know, like this Alvis thing you're talking about, right? It's like,
yeah,
deal 10 damage every time you cast a 5-card spell. It's like, okay, well, I'm casting Armor Master and it does 10 damage. Or like, I have a ring that applies 4 poison at the end of the turn. It's just like, well, even if I'm just stacking armor, I'm doing damage at some level, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, my current thing is I'm trying to beat Inferno, in adventure mode, which is sort of the like. Adventure mode is sort of like the storyless mode. You cut out all the story stuff and it pulls from all of the different
regions.
Like regions for like maps and enemies and bosses and that kind of thing. And my current build is built on that. It's like every 8 cards I spend on a defensive skill, I freeze the enemy for a little bit and I deal a bunch of damage, right? To all enemies, right? So it is just like, oh yeah, I can just chip away at you by armoring up and armoring up and armoring up over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and I think that power fantasy is like what makes it feel good, right? Is like, you know, you can just fuck with stuff, right? Like you can do stuff that like clearly means the synergist, but it's like, oh, I see. And
I do think that there's something about the level of mastery that you're getting at a little when you talk about like it's not just brainless, right?
Yeah. No, there's like level, like normal mode for me, like has been a process of going from like, you know, oh, I click on the thing that highlights my hands to like actually looking at it and like picking the hand I actually want to do, right? Because like, you know, I can do a mini flush a couple different ways. And if I do it this way, I can also pull a different hand in here, right? And like, you know, and that's becomes super. It's also like a neat learning curve, right? Like you slowly ramp up your ability to like build hands, which I think is super fun.
Yeah, I mean, the one that I get into, there's stuff that I'm doing now that I think of as like really advanced. But I think it's what the game supports, right? Which is like you using your card preview because you can actually see the next couple cards you're going to draw, right? And so knowing, oh, hey, maybe if I draw this one card, I'll draw into my straight and I can do, you know, whatever other things, right? Part of the fun thing of that quick hands build on Alviz isn't actually just that you're spending the 1 card every turn, so you can make straight flushes because you're drawing so many cards and you can keep sifting. So you go, okay, I have the 2, 3, 4 of clubs. I just need the 1, 5 or the 2 of the 1, 5 and 6, and I can do a straight flush, right? And so you start sifting down to get to your straight flush, and you're looking at your previews in order to like make that kind of thing work, right? And I think that's like that's just like a level of mastery that is really rewarding, I guess, to kind of get on top of. Plus there's some other stuff that's like that in other ways, right? Like armor, like doing the math on armoring up or actually, maybe a better example of this is temporary strength, right? So one of Valentina's builds is she can give herself a ton of strength for a single turn, right? And there's always a break point, which is, okay, if I give myself 8 temporary strength, right? I'm adding essentially 24 damage to my single cards. So for instance, man, this is like hard to explain. Okay, let's say I have 6 cards, right? I have each card deals 10 damage, right? And I have a thing that will do for let's say 3 of a kind, and it'll give me temporary strength plus 8, right? Technically, it's actually a DPS downgrade for me to use that ability because I'm dealing 60 total damage with these cards now, right? But I would be dealing God, what would it be? 18 times 3, 40, 50. No, wait, 54 damage. I'd be doing 54 damage instead. Yeah. And I know that that's just math or whatever, but it is really gratifying in order to see these lethals by essentially just being like, okay, I need to temporary strength. I need to juice my temporary strength twice, but that's it. Because if I go more than that, then I'm passing by this breakpoint. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
am I the only fucking person who finds fun in like doing these like really complicated math problems?
No, I mean, and that's the thing too, right? Is it's like it's a lot of mental math, which like there were definitely times where I'm like, I wish I could just roll over this and see my total incoming damage, so I know if I've got enough armor, right? Instead of having to do the math in my head. But I definitely see what you're saying, where it's like pulling out like pulling out the calculator to figure out like what the exact number is you need, right? And like trying to do the permutations. That's that is super satisfying. Yeah, especially because it's not like it's a. I think there's a level of satisfaction above and beyond when you know it's not a puzzle, right? Like a puzzle in a puzzle game, or like a lethal puzzle, right? Like there's a solution spot, and so you're like, oh, I got to keep thinking until I think of it. Like a game like this, right? Like there might not be a lethal solution puzzle, but there might, and so it makes it more special when you figure it out. It's like, oh, I got it, right? And
yeah, no, that is actually true. Like just before on this call, I was doing these Inferno runs, and I was doing them in a big call with a bunch of people from the company. And have you fought the deer? Did you fight the deer?
Yeah, I fought the deer a couple times at PAX, but yeah, I also fought it.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. The deer, which to be honest, the deer has fucked a lot of people. Somebody called out the deer in a Steam review. There's like, I keep fucking losing to this overpowered deer. I kept rolling the deer in adventure mode. So, okay, in adventure mode, you can pull any of the bosses, right? And I just kept running into the deer and dying. And then the last time I ran into the deer, and I'm doing this on Inferno, so everything is like way harder. Inferno is the highest level difficulty, right? It goes normal, hard, hellish, nightmare, Inferno. But I was able to win the battle with 6 health. I was able to get out of it with 6 health. And there was this one crucial moment where I was like, if I use my straight here, I can put him in lethal range, and maybe I draw into another straight and I win, right? It's really my only out. I don't have any other options. Or I could just feebly defense up and I could armor through this turn, but I just don't think I have a version of things where I actually kill him, right? And that's exactly what happened. I used my straight, and then the next turn I drew into another straight, and I was able to walk away with like 6 health. And it's like, that feels insanely good, because it feels like, first of all, the deer is really strong. Partially because it puts the rend debuff on you. It says every time you draw a card, you take a bunch of damage, which is hard to deal with for any class in the game. And Valentina, I think, has the easiest time of it because she has this huge health pool. She has 90 health, and armor is pretty good. Like, for instance, if you're going to be drawing in the middle of a turn, you can just armor yourself up and then draw into your armor, basically, which is not the worst thing in the world.
Also, I feel like if you armor ahead of time, or at least on normal, at least, you don't ever have to deal with rend if you don't ever let the deer touch you, right? Like
Oh,
this is
yeah.
this is actually my biggest problem with, like, I've played a little bit of Alvis, is like Valentina has taught me to, like, never take damage, right? And so, like, Alvis is like, this is not working. It's not working. It's like, I'm done with this. I'm gonna go play my armor character again.
Well, yeah. So that's the interesting thing about Alvis, though, because Alvis's defense is weirdly offensive, right?
Right.
With Valentina, you are increasing your own armor by a bunch, and so it's almost like a turtle strategy, right? Alvis is like a saboteur kind of strategy, right? He is reducing the incoming damage to 0, and that's the way that you don't take damage if you want to. But like Alvis and Nikora are both like harder. I think they are in terms of ascending difficulty. Because have you played any Nikora?
I haven't unlocked Nikora.
Oh, Nikora is really interesting because she uses energy shields, which is good, obviously.
Right.
But she only has 40 health, which means like you can just get blown out of the water sometimes. And energy shields are a real premium. Like you'll spend 3 cards to get 1 energy shield, and that's like a pretty good deal. But she has other defensive tools. The cool thing about Nikora, she can stun. All of her damage is elemental damage, right? So if you do 3 instances of lightning damage to a target, you stun that target for a turn. So if somebody's gonna hit you for a ton of, you can just be like, nope, I'll stun you out, right? And then she also uses frost damage, right? So if you're taking a bunch of little hits, you can use frost damage to whittle their attack down to 0.
Makes sense.
But yeah, it is definitely, man, it is hard. I actually have yet to beat the game on either Alvis or Nikora. But I've certainly been trying. Man, I want to talk about that third scene, but I also don't want to like spoil it for you in a way.
Yeah, no, again, and not to shit too hard on the game, but like I also feel like I'm going through and I'm reading these storylines, I'm like getting like shades of what I'm supposed to get of what's happening, right? Like I just went through the second scene, and one of the dialogue trees is like the Red Knight like yells at the drunk guy for being a traitor. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? I do not understand what is happening here, right? Like I get some of it, right? Like, I get that like the Blue Knight's the defense guy and the Red Knight's the offense guy, and there was like this band of them that used to be like the little furry guy and the blue guy, and I guess maybe the red guy, because there's a connection between the fox guy and the drunk guy. But like, it's like
there is lore to all of this.
I'm sure it's
yeah.
just like it is like more inscrutable than like Dark Souls because the translation's bad. Frankly.
Okay, so are you reading the dialogues in the inns?
Yeah.
Okay, is this where this is happening?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Most of it, right? Like sometimes, like you'll run into like the Blue Knight out in the field or whatever.
Well, yeah, because I get it with events are randomized, right? When you go to an event node on a path, and like I've had this happen before, where I go to an event node that is kind of picking up a story in the middle, and you're like, what on earth, right? And part of it is that like story threads from scene 1 continue into scene 2, right? So like if you roll an event in scene 1. If you don't roll an event in scene 1, but you roll an event in scene 2, you're kind of walking in the middle of that middle of that story. But yeah, there is a story to Dali, the tipsy, I think it's like tipsy drunk man or something. You end up learning these people's names, obviously, but they are introduced to you as like serious foxkin. Tipsy man.
yeah. Well, yes. Like it took me a little while to realize that like that's supposed to be like like a description until you figure out their names, right? Like the otter or the weasel in like the barkeeper. He's like Mochi, and it's like his real name is like Wampus or something, and he's
his real name is it's not Winston. Is it Winfred?
Yeah, Winfred.
Yeah. Because you find out that he's one of the astral envoys, right? Because the story of Zoeti is that you are learning to be like one of the chosen of the god. You're doing this pilgrimage to these temples, right? And you're meeting the people. Obviously, Rebel, Mommy, as she's known, is the first. Yeah, Tommy Mommy from the first. Oh yeah, or fucking Gary.
Who's Gary?
Yeah, Gary is the hyena shopkeeper.
Oh yeah,
that you meet in the towns. His name is Gary. He has a name. And it's funny because like there's all these like fantasy names, right? Like Cornetius Jyseka, right? Alvis, right? And just fucking Gary.
It fits him though. Like when he says buy money, that's supposed to be like him being like goodbye to the wallet that like like he's calling you money, right? Like
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, and then have you met Mr. Edric, the toad?
oh yeah, of course. Like he's the toad in the wheelchair, right? That's like yeah. And he's got a daughter who's like a who like wants to be a merchant just like her dad, but the dad is like, don't call me dad when in front of the customers.
And then she has the duck, and the duck's name is Peaches because it looks like a peach. I don't know if you know that. That might be secret lore. Yeah, Peach is the duck. Everybody went crazy for Peach is the duck on my stream the other day. Yeah, I definitely understand what you mean about the narrative. I liked piecing it together. There were some real plot twists in there. Plot twists you probably don't even know. But like the thing with Winfred, where you first see him because he's the innkeeper and his name is Mochi or whatever, he's like holding a thing, and then he turns into his like crazy, insane, blessed by the gods form, right? And he has this like giant frost chariot thing. Like that was I remember the first time I was like, damn, Mochi got hands, right? But I just mostly like their like personalities. Like Cornetius is a lot of fun. Because he's just like super overconfident and I mean I don't know. I guess I like them all for their own unique reasons in a way, because mostly what you're doing is you're spending time with the four of them individually, and then the final scene is you're going to each of these temples, and you choose kind of you have to get the blessing of the four different gods, right? And you're choosing the order in which you go to each of the temples, and those four are astral envoys of their specific god before you go fight. Do you even have you heard of the term extinction fiend? Is that
yeah.
Story?
It's okay. Like a thing that's set up, right? Like
yeah.
I mean, and Edric tells you it's like everybody who has that thing dies, right? Like like the chart we have.
The key.
Yeah. I guess the thing that's like a little frustrating to me is I can't tell sometimes if it's supposed to be mysterious or if the translation's bad, right? Like and that's a little bit of a shame. And also like it has gotten better as I've played the game, but like that early dialogue, like Rebel's dialogue is like cringy, right? It is like cringe out of my skull cringy, right? Like
I don't know, man. Everybody, Rebel is the one that everybody loves, so I'm sure. I guess.
Yeah, well, gamers are cringy, right? Like,
yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I think the thing that people, I think she just has a strong personality, right? She's so horny, I guess.
But like, my honestly, my initial was like, this is like some like anime nerds like wet dream. It's like, and then the demon lady says she's gotta flirt with me.
Technically, she's not a demon. Okay, she's a goat person.
Right, because demons are like,
or I think sheep technically.
Whatever, right? Like she looks like a succubus. It's like someone's like I mean, this is unfair, but it's like it's like this is like Morgan, definitely not Morgan, original character, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Araya in the chat, Rebel is bae. I love that Rebel is unapologetically horny woman and isn't evil. I feel like every Dami Mommy is evil.
Yeah, no,
that's true. Yeah, she is working for the good guys, right?
Right, like because like I mean, she does kind of have those kind of like trade off things, right? Like she sucks your max health for certain trade offs, but the kind of archetype is the succubus, right? Like even when the succubus is like on your side, it's kind of like a deal with the devil, right? Like I think everybody has their own sort of version of that, right? Because Cornetius like throws you into the deep end. There's one fight where he like makes you fight with the sandbags. Have you gotten to that fight? Yes, yeah. I mean, I beat the first scene, so yes.
Yeah, you can. There's different versions of this, right?
Oh, okay. Fight with the I fight.
Yeah, because there's one where you fight with the sandbags. There's another one where he like has he's like the scene is like he has a monster mostly defeated, and then he feeds the monster to get it back to full health. He's like, okay, now you do it, right? Like, he's also in story terms kind of like putting you in similar sorts of situations. The sandbags is brutal. The sandbags is brutal because it gives you the choice between light sandbags and heavy sandbags, and I
Right.
always want to take those heavy sandbags because you get a better reward out of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean the big one for me with this is the hornets in the second scene, right? Like, because you can either just like stand still, or you can like do multiple battles. Like, this time around, I didn't have armor master, so I was like, "There's no way I can like outlast those hornets. I'm just gonna go for the kills." It was so much easier, and I also think it had a better reward. Like the fucking sword of protection, I didn't find like the peaches and honey or whatever it is.
Oh, well, that's random. The reward? Yeah. No,
Oh.
but first of all, the sword of protection with the peaches and honey is hilarious. The peaches and honey is 999 gold, and it shows up rarely in shops or whatever. But when you use it, it immediately does like 2,000 damage. I want to say, right? Just like instantly. It's like a one shot. Which I've never gotten off, but I really want to now. I feel like there's an achievement for it, to be honest. But I don't actually know whether or not there is. But yeah, technically the reward for outlasting the hornets is better than the one for doing multiple battles.
Is it okay? Yeah, that makes sense. I will say, like, I was satisfied with the sword of protection when I got it off of that, but like, it feels like that fight, like the Outlast fight, is built for, an armor build, right? Where you just like stack armor and like pray to God that nothing gets through.
The interesting thing about that fight that I like a lot is doing it on characters because you can't do it on an offensively oriented character. But the thing is, you have to interrupt their chants, right? So one of the mechanics in the game is that they have these chants that say right, like it'll have like chant 20, and you need to deal 20 points of damage in order to interrupt their spell. The thing that makes the Hornet so dangerous is that they will chant to increase their strength by a bunch. So if you interrupt their chants, you can actually get through it a little bit, sort of like weather the storm. But yeah, it's hard. That stuff is hard, and I feel like I always take the hard stuff. This is like my eternal curse, right? I never lose at the end of a run. I lose on like chapter 2 or 3 because I'm always opting into the hardest version of every fight, even if my build isn't quite ready for it. And I'll sometimes just get blown out by fucking hornets, and like you have to call it a day.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I generally do the same thing, right? Like, it's like I choose the harder option unless like I know what's coming. Like, that is the nice thing about like the bosses at the end is like what they are, and so you can anticipate them a little bit and do a little bit.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody talks about I think it's called Jumper, the guy with revenge, the little raptor with revenge.
I don't think I've seen him.
He's a little raptor with revenge, and he does a 3-turn cycle, right? And the first turn is he hits you for like 10 damage 3 times, and then 3 damage 5 times, and then no damage at all. He buffs himself, right? But the thing that's important is he has revenge. So every time you deal damage to him, his attack goes up. And I feel like I have watched so many people kill themselves because they just kind of attack willy-nilly into him. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, he's going to do so much damage to me. But then you come back and you go, okay, well, you wait. You hit him on that third turn where the temporary strength doesn't matter, right? Or you have other sorts of, like I've done this a million times where you charge up for one big hit instead of hitting him for a bunch of times for like little damage, that kind of thing. There's like a bunch of different iterations of of how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a simple game, but it's very, very satisfying. Yeah.
I just want to say on the third map, okay, this is a little preview. On the third map, the thing that I'm talking about being super powerful really kicks into gear because you're fighting the Extinction Fiend, right? It's like the most powerful thing. The whole story is that like the Extinction Fiend has been sealed away. The fiends, the like little demons running around, can't break the seals, but a human can. And you find out that there's a half human, half fiend who is using his human side in order to break the seals. The thing in the third story map is you need to do every dialogue option, because the dialogue options in the third story map give you bonuses. They give you power-ups, right? It'll give you items, it'll give you accessories, stuff like that, right? So when you face off against the Extinction Fiend, you are way more powerful than in any of the other scenes, because like you're getting all this extra, like you're getting all this extra stuff, plus the temples that you're going to in order to like gain the blessings of the gods. All of those have big rewards in them as well, or whatever. And to me, that's the thing that like made Zoeti go to the next level of just like, oh my god, I can't. The power fantasy of having a long run is here, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. A question for you: does adventure mode, is it endless, or is it or does it have like a
It's not endless. It's 6 stages, just like regular Zoeti. It is much more fluid though. So for instance, you have a sense for the different gods, right? Like how the different gods work, what they do, their accessories, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like for instance, there's Denier, who is like the goddess of coins. There is Baton, who is the god of like defensive skills and like fire and stuff like that.
Yeah, health.
Epee is the god of attack skills and drawing cards and blades, that kind of thing. In adventure mode, you have the choice. You know how like when you go to an inn, you get the cute guide Mistasa. She gives you like an accessory for free all the time. She'll just like give you an accessory. In adventure mode, you have a choice of what you get. Like, and a lot of the times you're choosing between the gods. You're like, oh, do you want a set of Epee stuff or a set of Baton stuff, or do you want a Mistasa set, which is like the basic gear, right? That kind of a thing. And so it means that you can actually make more flexible and varied builds in a way, because like, so for instance, for Alves, if you're getting a bunch of Epee stuff, that's really good for you because he has a lot of synergy with the card draw that is in Epe's accessories and items and stuff like that. And so the kinds of builds that you can make are different because you have more options available to you. If that makes sense.
You have more choice. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also hidden bosses and stuff like that, right? So for instance, honestly, the first time I lost my Nightmarish run, which is the second to last difficulty, it's because I opted into the fucking hidden boss and I died. The hidden bosses are kind of spread throughout, but if you proc certain kind of like events or whatever, you can fight these hidden bosses. They are insanely powerful. And you gotta really, I don't know, you just gotta really be good in order to beat them, and even that a lot of the time is not enough. Like, so yeah, the there's stuff like that, right, where there are these hidden bosses, hidden things to do in adventure mode. So yeah, but it's not truly endless. What do you think you would want to go for like a fully truly like endless mode?
No, I just that's just kind of sometimes the thing that happens, right? Like you're going the distance as far as you can, but
Yeah.
I don't think roguelikes lend themselves well to that, because you kind of want to feel like you finished, right? Like the first time I beat the Enter the Gungeon and including like the end scene felt really, really good. And like I wouldn't want to try and do that with like, I wouldn't want to try and do like, like have a thing where like the floors just keep getting deeper, right? Like, I was just curious, that seems like it could be a thing. Yeah. It does feel kind of bad to like beat a run and then start from scratch on like the next scene, right? Like, I mean, it makes sense from a gameplay perspective, but it is kind of like, oh well, like a week ago or so, I was like, I am tired of adapting. I'm going to restart my run until I get like a decent starting hand. And that's the one that I went almost all the way to the end. But then I got killed by the last boss because of an interaction I think I was unaware of.
Well, do you know what the boss was offhand?
It was, so there was a little guy in the front and a big guy in the back, and
like a rabbit in the back?
No, like a big, like
stone guy, maybe, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay, yeah, I do know that boss. Yeah, okay, I know that boss, and I know exactly what killed you, right? Because you said it was like 35 damage for over 5 hits or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because that boss, the way that boss is sort of the opposite of the raptor, actually. It's like he spends 2 turns kind of charging up, and then he has this like insane Mondo hit. And and just yeah, can blow that piece of junk out of the sky, as they say.
But he did the Mondo hit on the first turn.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Like
Maybe
I
I'm
think
thinking of something different.
my best guess as to what happened is there was like a buff that I did not look at that was like buffs damage if you use an item, and I used 2 items immediately because it was the last fight. Right, I'll use like my
Oh, I do know. Yes, that is exactly what he has. Actually, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
like I didn't
I'm
even know
sorry.
that was an effect, and so I'm like, here's my first epic item that gives me 10 strength, and my second one that like like because they're all like full
Yeah.
fight buffs, right? And it's like, oh, okay, and then I look up and like, holy shit, and then it's like, oh no, and then I died.
Yeah, he gains 5 armor or 5 strength, I think, every time. Or charge, maybe it was 5 charger, like every time you use an item. Yep, I know who you're talking about. Which is tough because item builds are really fun. One of the things that's interesting about the game is that you can have builds that like work between characters even if they're not built for them. And one of those is an item build, right? That is just you have a bunch of accessories that trigger off of using items. First time I ever beat the game was with an item build, actually, just because it was one that I had seen the most because you see it across your different things, which I always thought was pretty interesting, right? Like I've never really seen that in a roguelike before, where you can kind of create this like character agnostic build just by getting the right accessories, or like looking for at a certain point you sort of look for this stuff and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get this and this and this, right? And then I'm gonna get the stuff that gives me items every time I rest, for instance, because now, every dumb little common item, every time I use that, I'm gaining a bunch of health, I'm dealing a bunch of damage, I'm drawing a bunch of cards, that kind of thing.
Trash balls, man. Just
Yeah.
like I don't like trash balls are great for like killing energy shields, right? Like it's
True.
yeah. But yeah, it does. I do definitely suffer from the kind of like, oh no, I need to save the item for the time. I also don't
My
know.
favorite thing about that is there is an accessory in the game that what's the opposite of punishes you? Rewards
Rewards.
you. Yeah, rewards you for doing that because it deals damage at the start of the match based on the number of items in your like that you are holding. So you just hoard,
Yeah,
right? Which is great because it's also what I do a lot of the time. I just sit there and hoard.
yeah. No, I mean, and there's like the one that's like, use this and spend all your coins to do a bunch of damage. Like,
Oh yeah, the sand hammer. I
yeah,
love
yeah.
that thing. I once one shot a hidden boss because the hidden boss had 2,000 health and I had like 1,100 coins or whatever. Because once I got the hammer, I just didn't spend any coins again. I just kept them. I was like, one day I will need to destroy someone, and that's exactly how I did it.
Read is good. Yeah, no, it
Yeah.
works out. Yeah, but yeah, no. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with regards to Zoeti?
I don't know. I probably do, but you know what? We can talk about it in like the back half in future weeks because I keep playing it in my off time. I'm like, it's funny because did I tell you about this last week that I had like the 0.1% of players achievement because I unlocked the max rank of Nicara and just like it was launch week and nobody else had
Right.
played the game as deep as me, kind of thing. It's funny to see some of that stuff kind of tick up. Like Lou, friend of the cast, Lou uh has a bunch of achievements now. I was like, oh, somebody's been going at it, right? Beating the first beating the first story achievement, and like the first boss, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny because I had thought initially that I was going to talk a bunch about development stuff, but I don't even know what I would talk about. Um, the crystal slime used to be broken as fuck. Did you ever fight the crystal slime?
Which one's the crystal slime?
Have you ever seen the crystal artillery thing where it just hits you for a bunch of damage at the beginning of the round, but every time you hit it, it shaves off one of the stacks?
Uh,
It's in the very first scene.
I feel like I have, but it's been a while since I played the first scene, so
Yeah, that thing used to be brutal. We talked about it constantly, and we made all of these memes about how crystal slime is really difficult to deal with. And it was just
I have the
because,
achievement for killing it, so yes.
yeah, the original version of the crystal slime was the deer. Basically, it was harder than the deer. And
I think that
uh,
the part of the thing that's like difficult about the deer is like it'll have like 5 or 6 stacks of evade and then like a 60 charge to like heal itself. Right? It's just kind of like, well, I guess you're gonna heal yourself then. I ain't got shit to deal with that, but yeah.
yeah, that's definitely real. The deer is I guess I'll just say this. The deer is getting nerfed. There's a big nerf patch coming down the pike, and the deer is getting excuse me, it's getting rebalanced a little alongside of it.
Yeah, so the thing that I always like the thing that this is you always take like the risky option thing is for the deer I always take the like attack it, right? And it feels like 4 of the last 5 times I've done that I've like gotten the shit under the stick.
Fair enough.
It's like from XCOM fucking percentages there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like 95% really means like 3% to hit. Yes, absolutely. I know that. I know that very well. I feel that for sure. God, now I'm like looking through the different bosses that I've killed. There's 1 or 2 bosses that I haven't done, but I don't know, whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that I want to talk about? I guess not.
All right. Well, then tell me how your week was.
Oh boy, what have I been doing this week? Mostly been playing Pathfinder Kingmaker. I'm
Okay.
actually really mad at Pathfinder Kingmaker. You want to talk about a game where you get into auto lose scenarios? I have had to go back on 20 hours of save game time in order to not lose that game. Okay, and it's honestly, I sort of think it's bullshit that I had to do this. So let me explain this fucking saga to you. Okay, so I'm doing Pathfinder Kingmaker. You played the actual Kingmaker adventure path, right?
Yes, yeah.
Did you play all the way to Pitax and King Aroveti or whatever? He's like the evil bard who's, like shitting on your kingdom or whatever.
Maybe what we beat the scenario. So I don't like is he the end boss?
No, the end boss is like a fae, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
He
okay.
is just like the king of a rival nation, right?
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Is it another river
Okay.
kingdom or is it a
Yes, yeah, it is
okay.
another river kingdom to like the west of you or whatever. Okay, so one of the things that Kingmaker does is it like gates your progress. It says you will fail this quest in X number of days if you don't do this thing, right? But unfortunately, I was sort of like put in this no-win scenario because basically what it was is I had defeated the boss of, let's call it the first half of the book, which is like this barbarian guy or whatever, right? And then you go to King Iroveti's tournament, you do all this stuff, he's a huge dick to you, and then he starts like attacking your kingdom with like propaganda. He's like paying these bards to go to your capital city and shit on you. He's paying bandits under the table to like raid your towns and villages. Monsters are showing up everywhere, and you know that it's like related to him or whatever. And the quest mentions those 3 particularly, right? So I go to his lands and I find these 3 places. One of them is the town where all the bards are, right? One of them is this place where this wizard is teleporting in these armored trolls to like fuck with you. These are the guys that are doing the monsters. One of them is the camp, the bandit camp, where all the bandits are taking their like ill-gotten gains or whatever, right? When you do those 3, you get your quest updates and it says the only thing you can do is wait for the opportune moment, right? And so I was like, okay, sure, that's fine. I'll wait. I'll wait for the opportune moment. And I'm just exploring the map. I have a bunch of random spots that I hadn't gone to. I go to these spots. I get a thing from the quest. The quest says you're gonna fail this quest in 60 days or whatever. I'm still doing other stuff. I'm just like completely doing other things. Okay, it says Pytax is winning the war, and I'm like, how is Pytax winning the war? I have defeated his guys or whatever. But my kingdom is in fucking disarray because while you're at war with Pytax, you're in your kingdom management stuff. You're constantly getting these really tough events, and I
Sure.
just couldn't win any of the events. And when you fail events, you lose stats. So your stats are going down, and when your stats hit 0, your kingdom starts like crumbling out from underneath you, basically. And when your kingdom is crumbling, your stats get even worse. When your stats are low, you have even worse chance of
Right.
defeating
Yeah.
these events.
It's a vicious cycle.
But you can turn on a kingdom invincibility mode, which I was like, you know what? Fuck it. This is bullshit. Whatever. I'll turn on kingdom invincibility mode. I will build this up later. I just need to figure out what the opportune moment is. Then it literally gets to like 4 or 5 days ahead of time. And I was like, when is this event gonna fucking proc? And I look it up, and there is a completely unrelated quest that has a 60-day timer on it, right? Where you can do a thing, you can undertake a project. And doing that quest reveals a secret 4th location that is unrelated to this war that progresses the Iravetti quest or whatever. And at that point I realized, well, I only have 5 days before I lose the game because I lose this quest, right? I just have like I have no way to do this 60-day thing. I have no way to do this countdown. I eventually walk all the way back to the beginning of that quest, right? Where it gives me that countdown, right? And I say, okay, well, it's gonna be tight, but I'm gonna be able to do the project. I'm gonna get this location. I'll do the location, then I'll go fight King Iravetti or whatever. I redo this whole 60 days with the thing, and because of how bad the kingdom is doing, I can't even complete the 60-day thing without it. And I was just like, this is the most insane bullshit I've ever had to deal with. So I have now gone all the way back to the beginning before I even go to the tournament that starts off this entire quest chain, right? Which is 24 hours of I've later looked up the playtime, right? I have lost 24 hours of fucking playtime to do this. And I'm redoing this like whole quest from the fucking beginning. This game is a lot of fun. I love this game.
I would say I would have dropped the game at this point. Like you would not. I would not have.
No, I understand. I wanted to. I actually did drop the game because the reason I'm playing Kingmaker is because I want to play Wrath of the Righteous. Everybody says Wrath of the Righteous is really fun. I've had a bunch of friends who are playing Wrath of the Righteous. They're saying they're having a really good time. I feel like I understand it better. With Kingmaker, I just kind of was like, whatever, I'll do what I want kind of thing. But with Wrath of the Righteous, I actually kind of have like a build I want to go. I want to, like do some specific kind of stuff or whatever. And I tried to play Wrath of the Righteous, and I was just sitting there in my character select screen, and I was like, I'm never going to be satisfied. I have to be Kingmaker. This is just killing me that I'm not, that I've given up on Kingmaker. So I went back to Kingmaker. That's when I figured out I had to go all the way back to the beginning of the tournament, right? In order to, do the stupid thing. Well, I want them to make more of these games. I don't know if they are.
They have said they're not doing. So I found out about this because Paizo just announced an Abomination Vaults video game, and I was like, oh yeah, and it's apparently going to be an ARPG because Owlcat's doing Warhammer 40K games now, or something like that.
Exclusively?
That is what one of the other guys in my D&D or my Pathfinder play group said.
I did know that they're doing Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's good. Like I don't play Kingmaker. And I won't play Kingmaker, and I won't play Wrath of the Righteous, and I won't play Abomination Vaults because I've played all of those games, like on the tabletop. And it's just like I don't want to do that again. I already did that, right? I did the better version of that.
Well, to be fair, I have enjoyed. I also played Kingmaker. I ran Kingmaker, but I've enjoyed it quite a lot because one of the things that Kingmaker does that's interesting is it weaves the story together sort of better than a. I don't want to say better, but sort of better in a more. You know how in a tabletop RPG, like the books as written can't account for player characters, right? This allows you to do that, right? All of the companions have stories and side quests or whatever that tie into the events of the game in a really satisfying way. I wouldn't say better. It's just different, right? You know,
Right.
like,
No, it's a more
Kingmaker
structured narrative, right? Like,
yeah. I loved my Kingmaker game, obviously, and I'm like proud of my Kingmaker game, but I would probably do Hell's Rebels, right? If they did Hell's Rebels, even though I'm also very proud of my Hell's Rebels
you
game.
fucking ruined me on Barzillai Throne. Like,
Oh,
he like featured fairly prominently in one of the I'm playing the first adventure path, which is Age of Ashes, and like the third book is in Kintargo, right? Like post revolution,
no,
right? And like this stuff happens with Barzillai. I'm like, oh, that guy that is like, no, that's not what happened. I'm like, fuck, right? Like,
yeah, no, Barzillai Thrune in the books is very basic. I mean,
yeah,
he has an interesting motive. Actually, the thing I keyed into was this motivation.
right. No, I think he did an excellent job with it. Yeah,
Yeah, the thing that he wants is to like leave a legacy or whatever, right? That's the reason why he's so like why he wants to break away, because he watched his family get snuffed out, because in Cheliax, right, like if you offend the family, they'll cut you out of history or whatever, right? And we never even, and this is the other thing that's so painful, we never actually even played the final like mega dungeon that I designed for Hell's Rebels. But the point of that mega dungeon is that Barzillai Thrune sort of makes the ultimate heroic sacrifice, because he makes a deal with God, what is he called in that? Not Abadar. It's just
which
Asmodeus, right?
Oh, Asmodeus. Yeah.
Yeah, he makes a deal with Asmodeus where he does get he does get his fame, right? That like the only thing he wants is to be famous, right? And so he sells his soul to Asmodeus to give the party the chance to get out of hell, because you guys had walked, you know, you had brought the army and fought up to the capital city of Cheliax, right? And then the leader of Cheliax like sprung this crazy trap because she made an insane deal with Asmodeus, and Barzillai essentially makes a counter deal where he sacrifices himself. He sacrifices his soul in perpetuity, but he is forever going to be, you know, the person who broke Cheliax over his back, because he gave you guys the opportunity to escape hell, and escaping hell is the mega dungeon, right? But all that stuff is just like, that was on me. That's not in the book or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to. The one I've always wanted to do is Hell's Vengeance, which is the the evil campaign.
Yeah.
That like takes place after Hell's Rebels. But wow, that's interesting. I can't believe they brought him back.
Well, so it's not him. It's like, so Kintargo is not doing 100% great post-revolution, because like, there's like corruption, but like these like ghosts of Barzillai Thrune just kind of appear and are like stalking the streets, and everybody's like, what the fuck, right? Like, and it's like a ploy by the big bad of the AP, right? Which is just like a bunch of like people who are trying to bring back the evil dragon god. I think right now are fighting undead. There's like a whole like there's some cool lore, right? Like there's this city, there's this dwarven city where like the orcs tried to starve out the city, and they did, and then like something like, you know, so many days after the orcs starve out the city and everybody in the city dies, they all just rise up and drive the orcs out as undead, right? And so there's like this undead kingdom underneath, and like a set of dwarves have carved out a piece of the southern part, and right now the party, spoilers for Age of Ashes, like my party is dealing with this undead king, is like, I will make a deal with you, right? Like you need me, I need you, because other undead are trying to like siphon off his undead forces. So, but it's you know, it's a cool story. I mean, game's a cool game. Actually, that's an interesting thing.
I am now super depressed that Alcat is not doing more of these, because I feel like there are a bunch of APs that I would want to do along these lines, right? Skull and Shackles, right, would be a great one. I don't know. Skull and Shackles would be hard, because how do you deal with water? How do you deal with underwater stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to deal with that from like the ground. You'd have to build the system with that. You know, that actually sounds like a good thing for like a second or third game, right? Is like, you know, you just take the frame of the first game, and then you spend your time building the underwater systems. Speaking
I mean, I guess
Pathfinder,
that's sort of what they did with Wrath, right? Because they put the mythic rules and Crusade rules kind of on top or whatever. Like you could sort of do that with the Rebellion, I guess. Like there's that Rebellion subsystem from Hell's Rebels or whatever. I would actually kind of be interested because like some of the more straightforward APs, like there's that one about that Hobgoblin army that I was like pumped for, but it turned out to kind of just be like straightforward and suck. Where it's just like you're playing this war story, but there's really not a lot more to it than just like killing a gazillion hobgoblins. God, man, what was it called? It's like the Ironclad Invasion or something like that.
Yeah, Ironbrow maybe, or Iron. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Now like I want to look it up. Did they restart the numbering on the
The APs?
the APs when they got to second edition? How did that work?
Yeah, so once second edition started, like the timeline moves forward, right? Essentially, as of the start of second edition, like all of the events of the previous APs have happened, right? Like this is why Age of Ashes is post Kintargo, right? Like post the revolution, right, or the rebellion. Everything is assumed to have ended in have resolved itself, and then it moves. It's been moving forward since, I think. But I think I think they restarted the numbering. Maybe I'm not super sure. It's a different set of rules.
Iron
too.
Gods, Giant Slayer, Hell's Rebels, Hell's Vengeance, Iron Fang Invasion is what.
There we go. That makes sense.
Called. Yeah. And then Age of Ashes, is the first of the second edition adventure paths. Interesting. Because I remember there's like a bunch in here that I always thought were like sweet, right? So like Serpent Skull, for instance, the one where you're in the jungles, you're looking for this like crazy artifact. It's like an Indiana Jones kind of story. Jade Regent is one that everybody really likes. Shattered Star is one that people talk about. I don't know, I just think there's a lot of cool stuff.
I agree. Yeah. Speaking of Pathfinder, have you heard about the remasters?
Okay, so I have heard about the remasters, but you described them in a way that I found very interesting, and I need to know more. So you said that it's like 3.5.
So there is the maximally cynical take, and they say it is not. Like, everything's backwards compatible. It's not major rule changes. The maximally cynical take is that there are significant enough rule changes that everybody's going to want to buy the new books, right? Like that, they say they're going to give the subscribers an option to skip the remaster books, but like there's enough changes that you're probably not going to want to do that, and it's significant enough that it's like not quite. Maybe 2.25 is a better way to put it, but like there's lots of like little changes. First of all, they're carrying out everything that could be in the SRD, because part of the motivation for this is a clean break from the OGL for the new thing, the ORC, because Wizards is a bunch of shitheads. Part of this, my read is like alignment is being pulled out of the game. My read on
that's awful.
My read on this is because they think that the classic grid is IP enough that Wizards could come after them for it if they wanted to. But like, they're still going to have Holy Unholy, and it's going to be more based on edicts and anathemas. Like, there's too much in there for like them to like really pull it out, because like Abadar's like lawful neutral, right? Like, it's like that's his whole deal, right? Like, so they have to acknowledge it in some way, but I think they're just pulling out like the thing. My claim is that they're doing this specifically to spite me, because I want the neutral champions, and they never came out with them, and now they don't need to ever come out with them. But that's mostly a joke.
Like lawful neutral,
true neutral, chaotic neutral. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Wow. That sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks so bad.
But what else is there? Like, there's some stuff that I think some changes that I think are good, right? Rogues get all martial weapons, wizards get all simple weapons. They get rid of the weird like legacy things. There are no more ability scores. It's just bonuses, which is I'm on. Right, so instead of having like strength of 12, bonus +1, you just have the bonus of +1.
So a belt of giant strength just increases your strength mod by +1 1 +2 +3.
Theoretically, but there haven't been
Yeah.
belts of giant strength. They got rid of the big 6 in PF2E base.
Okay.
So like getting you don't really get stats from items, because they were way too mandatory for like builds.
Yeah.
What else? Like apparently they're redoing focus points. Apparently they're buffing certain spells. Let me see if I can find
What are focus points?
so certain classes, certain casting classes or like hybrid classes, you get a spell that you can cast. Like it's a, spell cost. You get a focus point, you can cast it, and if you spend 10 minutes, you get your focus point back. So it's kind of like rechargeable spells. And then there's ways to grow the focus pool, but you can never have more than 3 of them. They said they're going to make them better. Let me see if be in this chat. I've got a list of somebody summarized the thing off of a stream. They are changing how dragons work because they think chromatic chromatic metallic is too Wizards IP. So it's gonna be like dragon families, which could be neat. There are 2 core rulebooks, or there are 2 player core rulebooks that are gonna come out in tandem, and it seems like somebody, one of my work friends that was looking at this, figured out that like all the things that have dragon related abilities are in the 2nd core rulebook because they probably need more time to figure that out. What is it? Like gnolls are being renamed to Kholo, KHOLO, which is like purely for SRD reasons. Good and evil damage are now holy and unholy. Spell levels are now spell ranks, which is just like a terminology change. Like some of it's little, some of it's more significant, and I think we're all waiting to kind of see exactly how significant it's all going to be. But we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. I don't know. It sounds interesting. Sounds
my take personally. My take personally is that they're not worried about the people like me who play a lot of PF2E and like will stay subscribed, right? They're worried about, the 10,000 people who just abandoned D&D to play PF2E only for like Paizo to be like, surprise, new books in 6 months, right? Like,
Yeah.
But that is my, I have no special information on this. This is my read of things. We'll see, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah, I could definitely see the legal thing makes a lot of sense to me. I think that underpins all of it, right? I feel like Paizo just had to look at that and they had to go, oh my God, right? Like, I didn't realize how fragile our company is because we're kind of relying on the good graces of this other, sort of like super predator corporation to not fuck with us. You know what I mean? It's just like very like, I mean,
and to be fair, right? Like the like, because I follow a lot of like legal podcasty type stuff, and like the 1 week where the 2 worlds collided, right? It was like a bunch of people being like, actually, Wizards probably doesn't have a strong claim to any of this, right? Like the OGL probably, like, you probably don't need the OGL to use a lot of like this kind of more generic stuff, but like the other part of this too is like, even if ultimately it's frivolous, right? Wizards could sue Paizo, and like Paizo would have to like fight it in court, which is expensive, and like, Wizards is owned by Hasbro, right? Like Hasbro has like a ton of money, which Paizo, even though it has a successful game, is not. Like they would need like somebody from like the Electronic Frontier Foundation or somebody to like do pro bono work for them, which who knows if that would happen or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, something that is something that's interesting is a lot of these companies don't see themselves as companies, like toy companies anymore, right? They see themselves as media companies. This is true for Mattel. It's true for Hasbro. But like, the idea that Hasbro has this idea in its head that it's not a toy company anymore. It is an IP company, right? Like they own their core product are these valuable IPs, like Transformers or whatever else, right? D&D. And I think in that frame, it makes a lot of sense to kind of be spooked by their approach to some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
they give away the bag, right? Like, it's like
Yeah.
basically Hasbro saw like, Critical Role, Dimension 20, right? Like all of these like big actual plays, like, obviously, they're not like, multi-million dollar properties or anything, but they're making good money and Hasbro is seeing none of it, right? Like other than kind of like, secondary sales caused by people who are interested in the game. They're like, we want us some of that, right? Like we built this,
I mean, I've been waiting for that. Man, we talked about this before. I've been waiting for that shoe to drop when it comes to Twitch streaming for a long time because technically it's a very similar situation, right? Where gaming publishers technically have the right to revoke your access to stream their games, right? But just kind of no one has stepped on the landmine because it would nuke you in kind of the same way that it nuked Hasbro, right?
I mean, Japanese developers do step on that landmine, right? Like that was a big thing about Persona 5, right? Like Persona 5, famously, they were like, the streaming restrictions were so strict that like you basically couldn't play the game on stream, and everybody was like, well, fuck, I guess we're not playing this, right? And like some of it's like kind of like shooting the foot type stuff because it's like advertising that's like not happening.
I had a really spooky conversation with somebody actually where they were talking about restricting access for specific streamers.
Well, that happened.
Like, did that happen?
So Firewatch specifically banned PewDiePie from like streaming their game.
Oh, you're right. That's true. That's interesting. When was that?
This is like years ago at this point. This is when PewDiePie was still a big enough thing that was a thing.
No, I had a whole conversation. I had a whole conversation with a developer who was asking my opinion on something. They were kind of worried about bad actors in their community. And here we go. Let me swap into my professional voice for a second. I was essentially consulting, not like officially or anything like that, but we were just talking about this. They were like building up their Discord server. I have a series of blogs that are published that are about the way that I run the Akupara server, the way that I constructed that server. And so they just want a little bit of my time to talk about some of this stuff. And they were really talking a lot about like, I think of certain streamers as being really harmful, negative people who I don't want to be associated with my title. What, like, do you ever restrict your access because someone is bad?
Yeah.
Whatever. I basically said no, right? I think there's a lot of I don't know. I want to put this a certain way, but it makes me sound like really conservative. There's a certain overcorrection, I guess, in terms of bad actors and bad actions that happens on the ground when it comes to certain.
Do you know the Michael Jordan quote?
What's the Michael Jordan quote?
Republicans buy shoes too.
Oh well, no, it's not even about that. It's just about like. It's easy if you're a first time indie developer, you haven't built a community before, right? You get spooked by some of the stories about, or like the ways in which gamers, let's say gamers with a capital G, get talked about or reported on or any of these sorts of things. I was just like, listen, I've like never had to ban someone in the Akupara server because they've been racist or whatever, right? Like the kind of communities that your game attracts are going to be related to the kinds of game that you are. You're not going to get a bunch of alt-right people who are like going to come play your like whatever
your pony simulator.
And so like it is sort of just this like fanciful problem. It's not practical. It doesn't happen in reality. And part of that I was just like they were talking about this thing. I was just like I guess I would understand. I wouldn't want, I don't know who's like the most ontologically evil person I could possibly think of.
Hitler?
Right. Yeah, like I wouldn't want Hitler. Sure, I wouldn't want fucking Hitler streaming mutazione or whatever, right? But the reality is that like indie games are just like that. You don't have the penetration in order to get any of like the modern people. Say like Nick Fuentes, right? Everybody fucking hates Nick Fuentes. He would never play your game on stream. So it's like, why would you even worry about this? It doesn't matter, right? The kinds of people who you think are dangerous, even if you had them on an email list, they would not open your email and read it because it's just like, you're just not batting that caliber, right? The kinds of people that you're batting caliber are going to be like small indie game variety streamers, of which there are many, and of which I think are really helpful, and I have really good relationships with a lot of them, right? But like these are just like not people who are like who you would expect to be bad or whatever. Anyway, I had that like whole conversation. And they were talking about it legally. They were like, yeah, like I know like I can enforce my license. And I was like, I don't know why you ever would even get into this situation, right? Like it just wouldn't happen. But like, sure, yeah, if you don't want Asmongold or someone to play your fucking game, I guess technically speaking, you could.
It feels like it's also a dangerous can of worms to open, right? Like, you ban somebody who's like, because like you said, Nick Fuentes, Hitler is not playing your game, right? But like you play someone who's like, the person that comes to mind is like Seth Tzinch, right? Like YouTuber, does edgy-ish content, right? Like you ban him because he's like too tasteless for you, right? It's like, well then, somebody in your community is going to be like, why don't you ban this person who is arguably worse in a slightly different way that you don't have a problem with? But then it's like, you open yourself up to that kind of criticism and that kind of, you just kind of like let it go. It's like, I think people pay less attention to it, right? Like nobody complains that like, I don't know, the Quartering plays Magic the Gathering or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
No one blames Hasbro for that, right?
Republicans buy shoes too. That's actually pretty funny. All things considered, I just feel like they, like nobody.
I don't know who
like
Anish Kapoor is, Arahe.
Wait, who are we talking about?
Arahe said, I want to make a band just Anish Kapoor joke here, but I don't know who Anish Kapoor is.
Shit, am I supposed to know who that is?
Is that a college humor person?
I don't know, maybe, yeah.
Anyway, go on. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, sure. It's just like this stuff to me is like not super practical. Honestly, a lot of these things kind of like regulate themselves also, right? For instance, the Railroad community is like this. Railroad community is a lot of young kids, pretty left-leaning, right? There's a lot of LGBT acceptance in that community, and I think that stuff is great, right? And like there have been people who have come to these games. Actually, Mutazione is a better example of this, right? Mutazione, the protagonist is explicitly bi. And there are people who will post on like the Steam discussions forums and be like, how woke is this game? And it's like, the protagonist is bi. She talks about having a crush on another girl, right? And it's like that person that person doesn't buy the game. So it's just like, to me, it's all this kind of stuff is a non-issue. But hey, it comes up. I've had even spookier conversations with bigger people than this about blacklists, which I think are very weird and bad. But it's a thing. Like we blacklist people for breaking embargoes. But I would basically never blacklist someone based on, kind of like ancillary political stuff, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even gonna like push this any further because I don't want to get into it. But like, it would be interesting to see like if kind of like the culture war around film and television ever like got to games in a way such that like X political personality opened it explicitly like conservative or explicitly like socialist. I guess you might consider the people who did
Disco Elysium, maybe?
Yeah. Which funnily enough got like bought out by like their like there's a whole controversy there about like them being
they got vultured out by a bunch of venture capitalists or something.
Well, that's
the story, and I that is not real information. Nobody believe me. That is just like this. I have not done the research on this, but that's just like what Twitter says about it.
Yeah. My understanding is that like, and again, don't quote me on this either, right? Is that like they got venture capital like with a handshake agreement that they wouldn't exercise creative control, and then when the game blew up, they're like, oh, we would like to, pull some of this control. That, or like the person who initially gave them the capital sold their interest to somebody who was not contractual, because it was a handshake agreement, is not like bound by those types of things. Something like that is what I think happened.
Yep.
But point being is like, that could happen. The thing to bring it back to the original point about like, streaming rights, is like, I'm surprised somebody like EA hasn't tried to like get Amazon and Google, we could get disclosure, I work for Google, but not in any relevant capacity, to like broadly license their products, right? Or like, and some sort of like revenue sharing model, right? Like, I could see EA being like, if Twitch, if you want to stream our games, right, you have to give us X% cut of the ad revenue or something like that.
No way. That's really interesting. I don't think they have the leverage. It's because the platformer protections, right? Like you are not liable for what people do on your platform if you make a good faith effort to police it, right? And so I don't think that they have the leverage to actually make a demand of Google, because Google's argument would be, well, if you want to restrict your copyright, if you want to exercise your license and kind of restrict how people play this game, that's fine. Send us DMCAs,
Right.
we will honor them, right?
Right. No. And like, I think that's one way it could go, but like I think they could absolutely do that. I'm surprised somebody hasn't tried, and maybe they have, right? Like, we wouldn't, neither of us would be privy to these conversations.
I mean, to be honest, the thing that I'm surprised about is that like Amazon, it would be the best example of this. Like, Microsoft has been in this space for like long enough, but like, you know how like big companies like make kind of inroads to like big gaming studios or whatever. Like, you can imagine a world when New World was coming out, when all these Amazon studio games were kind of like coming out, where like Amazon kind of walks into this because they're not a gaming company, they're sort of a tech company that is like stepping into this space for the first time. And I could easily see some, C-suite guy go, there's a bunch of money we're leaving on the table here by not exercising our right to license to all of these streamers or whatever. We should enforce it, right? And like, people who have been in the industry for long enough, right? Like, if you're at EA, Activision, whatever, that that's a dumb idea.
Right.
But like, you could imagine a world in which like some guy is like a dipshit because he just doesn't know the space, and he makes like some stupid decision along those sorts of lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, the reason I think it might be so, like, again, I need to be careful about certain things, but like, let's say that another major streaming platform ever threatened Twitch's dominance, as like,
Kick, for instance. You know about Kick?
Yeah, sure, Kick. Right. That's definitely the one I was thinking of. Like, ever threatened Twitch's dominance. I could see, say, like NEA or like, an Activision Blizzard under the ownership of Microsoft, if that ever happens, right? Doing something like, hey, we'll give you the exclusive streaming rights for a cut of the ad revenue, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, they've done that in other. That's what killed Hearthstone Esports. Hearthstone Esports went from Twitch to YouTube, and then just fucking like died because nobody watches stuff on, myself included, right?
Yeah, no, I mean,
it was funny because Hearthstone Esports contract with YouTube ended, and they went back to Twitch, and the numbers were the exact same, right? We were watching 15,000 viewer streams, right, for Hearthstone Esports 4 years ago. The contract expires in the first Masters tour that is on Twitch and not YouTube. Has 15,000 streamers on it. Or 50,000 viewers on it. I was like, they must have they had to have gotten insane money, because the numbers on YouTube were like 400, right?
Yeah, no, it is weird because like there's like, it's not like there's like a technology reason, right? Like, like YouTube streaming works just as well as Twitch streaming. We co-stream this on YouTube. I think we've gotten a grand total of like 5 viewers. I don't mean in any one stream. I mean like for the entire 6 months that we have been co-streaming on YouTube, we've gotten like 5 total viewers, right? Yeah. And it is vaguely within our interest to stream on YouTube, right? Like, theoretically,
Mostly just makes it easier for archiving, right?
Not only archiving, but like there's also like, because of my particular conflicts of interest, right? Like
Oh,
there
sure.
are things I could do on YouTube that I couldn't do on Twitch, right? Like,
Yeah.
not that we stream enough to be partnered in any environment, but
Yeah.
but like that it's like it is incredible to me, but like no one like really watches VODs that much on Twitch either, right? It's like the model is you stream on Twitch and then you export the VODs to YouTube, and the people who want to watch it in the VOD form watch it on YouTube. It's crazy, right? Like
No, that is exactly well. So this is
it's
exactly
crazy how
my thing,
ossified
right?
it is, right? Like
Yeah, like I remember I was having this argument, I think with Zhao of all people, right? Where someone was talking about how social media companies have a monopoly, but I don't think that that's true, right? The monopoly of Facebook doesn't exist because there's no other competitor to Facebook. It's because competitors to Facebook have to remix the fundamental formula in order to be successful and break through, right? Nobody does the core functionality of the Facebook platform better than Facebook, but the reason that Twitter or Instagram or Reddit take off as rival social media companies is because they are doing something fundamentally a little bit different, right?
right.
And I think that's the thing. No one is going to beat Twitch at Twitch's game, right? But you could beat Twitch, for instance, in the way that YouTube beats Twitch by being the better video hosting for like long form video content, right? Rather than live streaming, right? And those are both video platforms that are in competition with one another, but one of them does one thing, the other does the other thing, and that's just kind of like the world in which the two of them operate, right? This is like when Discord was doing their streaming stuff. I had a call with the Discord guy, and we were talking about it, and I asked him, I was like, like what is the purpose of these Discord streams, right? Like, is the idea that I'm going to be co-streaming to multiple other locations? And he was like, no, like we don't want to try and do Twitch but better, right? YouTube but better. We want to facilitate this thing that nobody has a good answer for, which is I'm a friend and I'm playing with a couple of other friends. We're all in voice together, and I want to show them what I'm doing in game before, because there are the 5 of us are playing League of Legends, the 6th person is out. We used to do this on Twitch, right? Where you would stream to the One True Mango on Twitch, and it wasn't for anybody, right? It was just for us because there were a couple of people in Discord and we wanted certain people to be able to follow along. Discord would eventually move into that space, and now Discord streams are how that happens, right? And I feel like that's the only way that this kind of stuff happens in social media, which is sort of unfortunate because I want someone to make a better Twitter than Twitter. But like,
Hey, Blue Sky exists. They implemented
Yeah,
blocks
I mean, so
because
did,
Matty Iglesias got flamed immediately.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
That was like a week ago.
do you have an invite to Blue Sky?
No,
Because they're still doing like open betas or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I have no particular interest in Blue Sky or like Mastodon or any of the alternative platforms, right? Like
neither do I.
My kind of attitude is like, if Twitter dies, it'll probably be better for me overall.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, I don't know. I hate a lot of I hate verified on Twitter. I think that shit is dumb.
Oh man, I don't know if you want to get into this now, but like, I have thoughts about like the verification thing on Twitter. Just because like,
what are your thoughts?
Oh, so like, I think Elon was fundamentally right that Twitter verification was a status symbol, but it only works as a Veblen good, right? It only works if it's rare, and the moment you let somebody pay for it, it loses all of its status, right? Like he thought he could monetize. He thought he could monetize the status, but the only thing he monetized was the check mark itself, right? Like,
I had this conversation with another game developer, right, where he was like apologizing, he was like hiding from people because he has the blue check mark or whatever, and he was explaining it to me. He was like, I have the blue check mark because the blue check mark includes features that are important to me. I can edit tweets. I can write longer tweets, right? I can, like my file uploading for like movies or whatever is like increased. And it's like, I would pay for this service, right? I like these additional features. But the way that Elon talks about what Twitter or whatever it is, Twitter verification is not an actual sales pitch to anyone, right? It's not like he is saying, "Hey, these are the cool things you are getting for Twitter Blue." He's just like he frames it in this thing where it's like, "I'm bringing power to the people." Oh, it shouldn't only be the elites that have the check mark. It's like, who the fuck cares about that? That's like the worst sales pitch for your product ever.
I mean, I agree with you that it's a bad sales pitch, but I think people did care. Like, I think there's been like a lot of kind of like revisionism in the past month or so, right? Like, people did care about it for a while, right? Like, but that was when it was like an actual mark of significance, right? The moment you start selling, it stops being that, right? Like, because like it's like you see a blue check, it's like, oh, this person is of some notoriety and significance, and then like part of the scam there was that like pre-Elon, essentially, if you were in a newsroom of a major news organization, they had a process that you could get a check mark, even if you were like, a once a month contributor, right? Type of deal.
Yeah.
And weren't that, but that's neither here nor there. It's just interesting, right? Because like, I think Elon's instinct was correct, but like his implementation was like, you can't sell it, right? Like, or it just loses value immediately. But you got to do something when you paid $1 billion for like.
Yeah, $44 billion in the hole or whatever.
Yeah.
Honestly, I will eat those memes up all day long. Like, what a fucking moron. I don't know. Like, it's funny because, wow, whatever. We don't need to talk about Elon Musk. How do we get some derps talk about social media tech companies fucking marketing strategies, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's vaguely related.
Yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of ads for Paradox games on Twitter. To bring it back.
Well, the new Solaris DLC is coming out, right? And also Age of the other one, Age of Wonders.
Yeah, Age of Wonders 4. Age of Wonders 4 just came out like yesterday, I think.
Yeah.
And Crusader Kings has a second season that's rolling out.
Yeah, the tournaments one is the thing that they're doing now. Yeah, I'm really interested in the new Stellaris DLC because they're revamping like leaders in sort of the vein of Crusader Kings, where they're a little bit more kind of like characters you level up, have stats, which I think is a great choice. Like if there's anything that Total War Warhammer 3 did that improved on the Total War formula, in my opinion, it is giving you characters to get attached to by introducing these sort of RPG mechanics. Like the older Total War games had pieces of this, but it just like wasn't as robust a system. But it actually matters to me quite a lot, right? And I think it'll matter quite a lot in Stellaris as well. So I'm excited for that.
I would say I think the magic for Total War like would happen is like, because right now those characters are all like typically like significant lore characters from like the Warhammer universe, correct?
So some of them are, yeah, but I just mean on a normal scale,
okay.
Right? Like every time, like so for instance, when you recruit a general, that general still has 40 skill points to like level up with, right? And you can make them immortal, right? So your highest level generals, you can keep them around. They don't even if they die, they just get wounded and can kind of come back into the pool. You can specialize. Like this is always the kind of thing that I always get attached to, right? It's like you specialize a general in this kind of an army, right? And like you take them and they go and do wonderful things for you when they attack enemy settlements, that kind of a thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, so the thing that you made me think of immediately is like, when does the patent on Shadow of Mordor run out? Because I want that fucking Nemesis system in another game, like any other game. I think they patented the system. Only
they did. Do they do extra damage to armored units when they are immortal? Is that a StarCraft 2 reference? Are you making StarCraft 2 references in my chat?
That is definitely a reference that Charles would make.
Probably like 5 years or so. Yeah. Yes, good. I'm glad. I mean, I have been playing a lot of StarCraft 2. I'm all the way through Heart of the Swarm. I've almost beaten Heart of the Swarm at this point. God, what a game. I love these StarCraft games so much. I don't know. Eventually, I will beat. I think I'm on the second to last mission. Invading Core Hall, so you can take down Emperor Mengsk. But yeah, anyway.
StarCraft.
I think we're pretty over time.
Yeah, we're pretty over time. If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at subderpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@subderpsgames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/subderpsgames for these go out live that are or youtube.com/subderpsgames. That's everything. Or we've got rate, review us, all that stuff. That's everything I've got. But do you have anything you're looking to promote?
No, I guess I don't have anything looking to promote. I guess outside of the fact that we just sort of promoted Zoeti this whole time.
Yeah.
By talking about this game. Play Zoeti. It's a lot of fun.
Stream Zoeti on YouTube. Make us both.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, Charles. I would say with that, until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.